because there's a whole.
Yeah, but who?
Oh, Elizabeth Bishop. We're still going to be on
Okay.
Elizabeth Bishop.
Okay, you sent us a new one of hers.
I did, but
Uh,
we're going to go
there.
on Elizabeth Bishop 1. We're still on Elizabeth Bishop 1.
Oh, okay. I've got that here. Okay, very good. And here we go.
There was a really funny email that we all just got with the heading Bishop and Lowell, but it was actually a message about A1 and something. And the question was, who's the better writer? And I'm like, that's a really weird question to be asking, who's the better writer, you know? Okay, let's zoom on down until we get back past where we were last week.
Start the recording.
I did.
Okay.
We thank you though. We are recording.
Start recording. Okay, we're zooming down, zooming down. We talked about a lot of stuff last week. Peter has made the most beautiful compilation of Lowell poems, which I sent you. Okay, let's look briefly at Arrival at Santos, which is where we are now. And I'm sorry that the spacing got so messed up with um the stuff. Okay, so Arrival at Santos. And remember, I told you that Elizabeth Bishop went to Brazil. She was on a cruise, a boat trip, and then she had not planned to stay very long in Brazil, but she ate a cashew which poisoned her. This is 1952. So she had to be taken ashore, and she lived for the next 12 years because when she was in the hospital, the woman who became her lover, Lota, came to help take care of her. Lota, I guess, was like an important public citizen or something. And,
Architect.
and well, she was an architect, but why did she come to the hospital? That's what I'm not sure about. And then Bishop ended up living with Lota for the next 12 years. And so we'll be looking at some of her Brazil poems and also some of her Miller. Arrival at Santos. And this is interesting because the tone is so arch. Here is a coast, here is a harbor. Here, after a meager diet of horizon, is some scenery, impractically shaped and, who knows, self-pitying mountains, sad and harsh beneath their frivolous greenery, with a little church on top of one, and warehouses, some of them painted a feeble pink or blue, and some tall, uncertain palms. Oh, tourist, is this how this country is going to answer you and your immodest demands for a different world and a better life and complete comprehension of both at last and immediately after 18 days of suspension? Finish your breakfast. The tender is coming, a strange and ancient craft, flying a strange and brilliant light. So that's the flag.
Anne, I'm sorry to interrupt, but somebody's got a microphone open and there's a lot of background noise. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
So maybe everybody can mute who's not me. Okay, thank you. So that's the flag. Thanks, Leslie. I never saw it before. I somehow never thought of there being a flag, but of course there was all along. And coins, I suppose, and paper money, they remain to be seen. And gingerly now we climb down the ladder backward, myself and a fellow passenger named Miss Breen, descending into the midst of 26 freighters waiting to be loaded with green coffee beans. Please, boy, do be more careful with that boat hook. Watch out. Oh, it has caught Miss Breen's skirt. There. Miss Breen is about 70, a retired police lieutenant, 6 feet tall, with beautiful bright blue eyes and a kind expression. Her home, when she is at home, is in Glen Falls, New York. There. We are settled. The customs officials will speak English, we hope, and leave us our bourbon and cigarettes. Ports are necessities like postage stamps or soap, but they seldom seem to care what impression they make, or like this, only attempt, since it does not matter, the unassertive colors of soap or postage stamps, wasting away like the former, slipping the way the latter do when we mail the letters we wrote on the boat, either because the glue here is very inferior or because of the heat. We leave Santos at once. We are driving to the interior. So this is another of her travel poems, obviously another poems about, the strange and tawdry wonders of the world. And one thing I like about this poem, I don't think it's one of her greatest poems, but one thing I like about it is its playfulness, is its goofiness sometimes. I mean, the kind of audacity of Glen Fall, like that, so that she can keep the rhyme, or naming this character Miss Breen just because she wants it to rhyme with scene and beans. So you got scene, Breen, beans, and just a kind of playful excitement of arriving in a new place with a serious undertone of, oh, tourist, is this how this country is going to answer you in your immodest demands for a different world, a better life, and complete comprehension of both at last? And immediately after 18 days of suspension, which reminds me of the longing expressed at the end of the 2000 illustrations poem, gazed and gazed our infant heart away if we could only see the manger scene, the family with its pets. You remember that we talked about last time. So there's a kind of serious undertone that what we expect tourism, we expect going around the world to add up to something rather than, as she said in the other poem, and, you know. Um, but I still think it's a kind of charming poem arrival at Santos. Any comments about this one before we move on?
Where is Santos?
Coast of Brazil.
But where on that
I
coast?
don't
It's
know.
an enormous coast. I'll
What?
find
You're
I
just
think
gonna go
What?
find Santos.
yeah, I think it's
What?
way up in the north. It's
that sounds
it's
right. Near
yeah,
Recife, maybe.
yeah.
Where is what is the 18 days of suspension?
When they were on the boat.
Oh, 18 days?
Oh yeah. Goodness, when I was a kid, we went from Oakland, California to Japan to go join my dad in 1955, 17 days. Because she's coming from the States and she's coming all the way down from the East Coast,
I
however
can
she
tell you
got.
about Glens Falls. It's the next town north of me and from Saratoga. It's just 20 miles.
That's cool. So
Okay.
Yeah,
you're nearly famous in Elizabeth Bishop's poetry.
There you
That's
go.
just
cool.
about.
Yep.
Yeah,
So let's go down to the next one
yeah.
while Peter's looking up where Santos is. The Armadillo. Okay, yeah, this is one of her most famous poems. And I mentioned her very close friendship with Robert Lowell, her devoted friendship through many years with Robert Lowell. And they wrote poems dedicated back and forth to each other. He dedicated Skunk Hour to her because she had dedicated The Armadillo to him. The Armadillo for Robert Lowell. This is the time of year when almost every night the frail, illegal fire balloons appear, climbing the mountain height, rising toward a saint still honored in these parts. The paper chambers flush and fill with light that comes and goes like hearts. Once up against the sky, it's hard to tell them from the stars. Planets, that is, the tinted ones. Venus going down, or Mars, or the pale green one. With a wind, they flare and falter, wobble and toss. But if it's still, they steer between the kite sticks of the Southern Cross, receding, dwindling, solemnly and steadily forsaking us, or in the downdraft from a peak suddenly turning dangerous. Last night, another big one fell. It splattered like an egg of fire against the cliff behind the house. The flame ran down. We saw the pair of owls who nest there flying up and up, their whirling black and white stained bright pink underneath, until they shrieked up out of sight. The ancient owl's nest must have burned. Hastily, all alone, a glistening armadillo left the scene, rose flecked, head down, tail down, and then a baby rabbit jumped out, short eared to our surprise. So soft, a handful of intangible ash with fixed, ignited eyes. Too pretty, dreamlike mimicry, Oh, falling fire and piercing cry and panic, and a weak mailed fist clenched ignorant against the sky. So I mentioned that Bishop was living with her lover up in the mountains. And this obviously is taking place one night there. They're living there. They see the fire balloons um, rising into the sky. And then all of a sudden they're alarmed because one of them falls and splatters and starts a forest fire that comes sweeping down the cliffside. Um, so I don't have too much to say about this poem, except that, it's juxtaposing religious celebration commemorated with this beautiful ritual, this visually beautiful ritual of the fire balloons that soar up into the sky, and that look like planets and then finally recede, if we're lucky, just recede infinitely into space. But then all of a sudden they can become incredibly dangerous. And so the danger and the beauty are mingled together and they can start a fire. And then we have the animals, the owls, the armadillo, the little baby rabbit, who are caught up in this, um, trap, in a way, trap that humans have laid. So again, there's this kind of eco element to this poem, commenting on the suffering, the loss of the nests, the fear, the panic. And as some critics mentioned, this poem is written during the Cold War. So obviously she's thinking about, bombs as well. She's thinking about, but never mentioning bombs, but thinking in a sort of corollary fashion about the panic and the fear that fire raining down from the heavens causes. Too pretty dreamlike mimicry. I have always been really flummoxed by the final stanza. Peter understands it better than I do, so I'm going to turn the mic over to him for a moment.
I'm not sure what to say. It seems relatively simple. Um,
Mimicry of what?
Mimicry of human beings fleeing from bombs or fire from the
Yeah.
sky, I think.
Or this whole ritual is a dreamlike mimicry of bombs, the
Well,
fire balloons.
yeah, I mean that would be part of it. That would be
Hmm.
part of it. The whole, not just the animals running away and the owls flying away, but the whole
The whole
story
ritual.
she's told in the poem.
Hmm.
The fire balloons falling is not part of the ritual, but it's a risk involved with the
Exactly.
ritual.
Exactly.
Um, and the weak-mailed fist, I take it to be the entire armadillo, that is, with its armored plates. It is like a mailed fist. It doesn't have a mailed fist, but it is itself a mailed fist, and it's as if clenched against the sky, but of course it's just clenched in self-protection.
Right.
Well, an armadillo has armor, has
Yeah.
mail. Yeah, that's what I'm
But it's
saying. It's
helpless
the
against the fire balloons.
the whole, well, no, the plates were probably protected a little bit. I think that's
Not in
true.
forest fire.
Well, it isn't necessarily a forest fire. Real big forest fires don't get started that easily, and she doesn't say this is a forest fire. She just says where the balloon lands, there's fire, and the animals and the birds run away or fly away. I think this might be Elizabeth Bishop's best poem, although at the fish houses and the fish and the moose have, strong
Yeah.
claims. I know Anne does not think so. And it isn't that I automatically like rhymed and metrical poems better. It's that I think she does it really
She
beautifully
does.
and with a very natural voice and very precise observation.
I haven't thought about the mailed fist. I still am not crazy about those lines, but it's like that's from a much earlier time of warfare when people would be wearing armor,
Oh, yeah.
and then that's totally helpless against modern warfare. Laurel has her little hand up in the air, her little
Say that,
yellow.
and yeah, one of the ironies, and it's very, very, it's only mentioned at the very beginning, is this is presumably a imitation of a prayer or a ritual of a prayer that
Hmm.
that they're
A
praying.
holy ritual. Yeah.
And, um, they send the fire balloons up, but what comes back is not necessarily the answer that one would hope for.
Right. Exactly. Yes, Otis.
I just want to say I love the rhyming of um, forsaking us and dangerous. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Barry.
Just going to say, Peter, you answered my question because I was wondering why she titled the poem "The Armadillo." Why is the armadillo more important than anything else? But
Yeah.
I think you answered that because it is that mailed fist that we all put up against the war. So I thought that was helpful to me.
And it's as if the armadillo represents the other animals at that
Yeah,
Yeah.
point.
yeah.
Yeah. Other comments about this poem?
I was what is a fire balloon?
This is a good question. I've seen pictures, but I don't know if they're accurate. It's like a what's the like an air balloon, except that in the little thing hanging down there's fire, and the fire somehow, does anybody know?
It's like a Chinese lantern. They're like a kite that has a little flame in it that goes up. They put those aloft in New Mexico. Um, that's what I thought of
Okay. So the flame is inside the fire balloon.
They're hot
beneath
air
it.
balloons, but the size of a supermarket bag.
Yeah,
It's like that
exactly.
with a candle
And
hanging below.
Has to be
Yeah.
below.
Yeah.
in Disney's Tangled, they have a scene where the fire balloons all go up in commemoration of the baby that was stolen.
Hmm.
And she sees them. I mean, it's a really beautiful scene, but that's
What's that in? What's
if
that
you
in?
watch your Disney, you would that would be what it was.
Exactly. And what is it? A movie called Tangled?
It's the story of Rapunzel retold
Oh,
all of Disney, where when all of the titles were words like tangled, what were the other ones that were all verb forms?
oh, okay. Oh, cool.
Brave.
Frozen.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's see what comes after
I
the armadillo.
I
Oh,
wanted to quibble with Bishop's astronomy. I don't know of a planet that looks pale green
I
when
I'm
you
know.
look at
I
it
puzzled
know.
in the
by that
sky.
too.
I know.
If it she's already named Venus, and Venus does not look pale green anyway, but I can't
No,
imagine what planet it is.
no, no. The ones that are would look green are not visible to the eye.
Yeah. I found out where Santos is.
Uh-huh.
We
Where?
were wrong. It's the port of Sao Paulo. It's south of Rio de Janeiro, but Sao Paulo is on a plateau a few miles inland. And if you go to there, you go first to Santos.
So she's way down there.
She's way down there. I
Yeah.
was thinking that if she landed in the northeast of Brazil, that would show somebody unusually adventurous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because, the Northeast is so different from the rest of Brazil that in a recent movie we saw, the Southerners say, or one of them says, it gets them into a fight. There's Brazil and then there's the North.
Yeah. It's true. And also because when our friend Beth Ann Fennelly had a Fulbright, she went to Minas Gerais, which is the area where Elizabeth Bishop lived. Okay, so let's zoom on down and see where we get.
I knew she ended up near.
Sestina, this is a gorgeous poem. So y'all know what a sestina is, I think, probably. It's a traditional form. It's a six-line stanza, and it doesn't rhyme, but as you'll see, you choose six end words: house, grandmother, child, stove, almanac, tears, and then you repeat them in a certain set pattern. So stanza one, we've got house, grandmother, child, stove, almanac, tears. Stanza two, tears, house, which is 6-1, almanac, grandmother, which is 5-2, stove, child, 4-3. And then for the third stanza, you go to child and then tears, and you can map it out, and so there's a certain traditional order that these end words go in. And then it ends with a three-line stanza in which all six words are repeated, one halfway through a line, one at the end, one halfway through line two, one at the end, one halfway through line three, one at the end. So it's a good is a good type of poem, a good form of poem for a narrative that is turning the same story around and around and around and kind of feeling your way through it, thinking your way through it. So let's look at Sestina, and I'll find it in my book. I mentioned Bishop's tragic childhood, and I also mentioned the fact that she's always very reserved when she talks about grief, about loss, about loneliness. She never engages in melodrama or even in a high degree of confessionalism. But just listen to this poem, and it's just really touching. Oh, and before I read it, I wanted to ask you to do one thing. If you've got paper by you, if you can get paper real fast, draw a house in 1 second the way you drew it when you were a little kid. Don't think about it, just do it.
I could do that. For that paper.
So I'm going to start reading the poem. Says Tina, September rain falls on the house. In the failing light, the old grandmother sits in the kitchen with the child beside the little marble stove, reading the jokes from the almanac, laughing and talking to hide her tears. She thinks that her equinoctial tears and the rain that beats on the roof of the house were both foretold by the almanac, but only known to a grandmother. The iron kettle sings on the stove. She cuts some bread and says to the child, "It's time for tea now." But the child is watching the tea kettle's small, hard tears dance like mad on the hot black stove, the way the rain must dance on the house. Tidying up, the old grandmother hangs up the clever almanac on its string. Bird-like, the almanac hovers half open above the child, hovers above the old grandmother and her teacup full of dark brown tears. She shivers and says she thinks the house feels chilly and puts more wood in the stove. "It was to be," said the marble stove. "I know what I know," says the almanac. With crayons, the child draws a rigid house and a winding pathway. Then the child puts in a man with buttons like tears and shows it proudly to the grandmother. But secretly, while the grandmother busies herself about the stove, the little moons fall down like tears from between the pages of the almanac into the flower bed the child has carefully placed in the front of the house. "Time to plant tears," says the almanac. The grandmother sings to the marvelous stove, and the child draws another inscrutable house. I think this is one of her most touching poems, just so beautiful. So we notice the strange word here, the word that doesn't make sense except in the context of Bishop's own life, is tears. Time to plant tears, the teacup full of brown tears, the seeds like tears, the equinoctial tears. So it's a poem, what about her own childhood? About the fact that her father died when she was an infant, the fact that her mother went mad, that the grandmother could see this coming, the child couldn't. Somehow the almanac could see it coming. The marble stove could see it coming. Everything could see it coming except the child. So show me, if you drew a house, show me what you drew. Yep. Yep. I have done this. Yep. I have done this over and over and over with students. 99% of them draw the same house. It's just amazing. It's so cool. It's like we all in this country, I don't know, maybe other places too, we all drew the same house as little kids. And
We
that's,
don't live,
And
hardly any of us
this
grew up in a house like that.
I know some
and
of
then
us did. I
well,
know.
the smoke coming out of the fireplace and the whole thing,
Yeah, yeah. And the winding path in front and the
Right.
flowers and the windows and the door. The windows like eyes, the door kind of like a nose or a mouth. The roof that goes up like this, the chimney, the swirling smoke. It's just uncanny. It's just wonderful. So this is what she's drawing here. She's drawing home, but she's drawing absence. She's drawing grief. She's drawing another inscrutable house. That is to say, a house where you can't scrutinize it. You can't get at the answers. You can't get at the mystery. I mean, this 6-year-old who never saw her mother again ever, you know, until the mother died decades later. The grandmother who loved her very, very much, and she's sitting with the grandmother, and the grandmother is sheltering her, protecting her, being with her. But the grandmother can't replace all that loss, you know? So, as I said, I think the sestina is a beautiful form for this poem, partly because it's so rigidly controlled, and partly because it allows you in a pattern, a repeating but changing pattern. So you've got repetition and variation to come back and again and again and again to the same trauma, to the same loss, to the same room, to the same time, to the same weather, to the same, marvel stove, the almanac hanging like a bird. Is that a bird of prey? Is that a raven? What is that? But this beautiful image too from its string. And then, of course, the Nova Scotian ritual of tea, time for tea now. And the little kid, it's such an amazing story about this childhood that is characterized by both being loved and this incredible sense of grief and loss. Remember, I said last time she described herself as the loneliest person in the world, you know? But how much more effective once we feel our way into it than it would be if she tried to write some melodramatic poem about the same sense.
Well, or even a factually explicit poem
Yeah,
about the same scene. That wouldn't really work
yeah.
either.
Douglas?
Yeah, there's some. If you do a search on Little Marvel Stove, um, there's mention of the poem and of Elizabeth Bishop and pictures of the little cast iron stoves that many of us had as little kids, especially if we had an older sister like I did. And 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 there's a stove called a Monarch, which is a wood burning or a coal burning cook stove, which looks just like the little Marvel
Yeah.
stove.
So how big would a little marble stove be?
Oh, maybe 8 to 10 inches long, maybe, and
Interesting.
6 or 8 inches high.
That's
And it's
interesting.
cast iron. The oven doors open, the little
Yeah,
lids lifted off.
yeah, yeah. I mean, probably, I remember at one point I had some kind of little toy bake set type thing as a little kid. Kids are fascinated by those miniatures of grown-up appliances and so on, furniture, dollhouses. Oh God, what a beautiful poem. Okay, let's see where we get now. Oh yeah, Julia, please. You're mute. You're mute. Julia, you're mute. It was interesting, but we couldn't hear you.
I noticed the way that the tears were imbued in the poem in so many different forms that they took a different, you know, um, they were seeds, they were plants, they were tea drops, they were,
Moons.
but they were t tears everywhere, and
Yeah,
and that just kind of washed the whole. Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful about all the repetition
yeah. Time to plant tears.
and the sadness. Yes.
God, what a poem. What a poem. Yeah, great. So let's look at a few more. We've got some incredible poems in this bunch of Elizabeth Bishop poems. Tony, thank you for being so nice about bobbing back and forth with the screen share. We can skip a filling station, but it's quite lovable. Actually, let's read it because here we do have a mom. Filling station. Oh, but it is dirty. This little filling station, oil soaked, oil permeated to a disturbing overall black translucency. Be careful with that match. Father wears a dirty, oil-soaked monkey suit that cuts him under the arms, and several quick and saucy and greasy sons assist him. It's a family filling station, all quite thoroughly dirty. Do they live in the station? It has a cement porch behind the pumps, and on it a set of crushed and grease-impregnated wicker work. On the wicker sofa, a dirty dog, quite comfy. Some comic books provide the only note of color, of certain color. They lie upon a big, dim doily, draping a tabouret, part of the set, beside a big hirsute begonia. Why the extraneous plant? Why the tabouret? Why, oh, why the doily, embroidered in daisy stitch with marguerites, I think, and heavy with gray crochet? Somebody embroidered the doily. Somebody waters the plant, or oils it, maybe. Somebody arranges the rows of cans so that they softly say, "Eso, so," to high-strung automobiles. Somebody loves us all. It's a great little funny poem, right? Now, we cannot know for sure that it's a mom, but I suspect that there's a mom on the premises and that she loves her family, her greasy husband and her greasy sons, and that she embroidered this god-awful doily with its gray crochet and its marguerites, and that she waters the great begonia, you know. Um, but it's lovely, isn't it? And then the kind of soothing murmur of Esso. You know, if you do crossword puzzles, you're always getting Canadian gasoline brand, and the answer is always Esso, you know, Esso, and then Esso, so. Kind of like a little lullaby, a little hushed whisper, and also this what Wallace Stevens calls blessed rage for order, lining up the cans just so, you know, so that they just look very pretty and orderly, all stacked up there in the gas station. Yeah, it's kind of a sweet poem. Okay, back we go. Back to screen share, please. Thank you. Oh, this is great in the waiting room. Remember, I said that when she was 6 or 7, her paternal grandparents took her to live in Worcester, Massachusetts. So she was still little. She said, you know, it wasn't with her foreknowledge or consent. It just was done. And here she is in the waiting room with her aunt Consuelo. In the waiting room in Worcester, Massachusetts, I went with Aunt Consuelo to keep her dentist appointment and sat and waited for her in the dentist waiting room. It was winter. It got dark early. The waiting room was full of grown-up people, arctics and overcoats, lamps and magazines. My aunt was inside what seemed like a long time, and while I waited, I read the National Geographic. I could read and carefully studied the photographs. The inside of a volcano, black and full of ashes. Then it was spilling over in rivulets of fire. Osa and Martin Johnson dressed in riding breeches, laced boots, and pith helmets. A dead man slung on a pole. Long pig, the caption said. Babies with pointed heads wound round and round with string. Black naked women with necks wound around and around with wire like necks of light bulbs. Their breasts were terrifying. I read it right straight through. I was too shy to stop. And then I looked at the cover, the yellow margins, the date. Suddenly from inside came an ah of pain. Aunt Consuelo's voice, not very loud or long. I wasn't at all surprised, even then I knew she was a foolish, timid woman. I might have been embarrassed, but wasn't. What took me completely by surprise was that it was me, my voice, in my mouth. Without thinking at all, I was my foolish aunt. We were falling, our eyes glued to the cover of the National Geographic, February 1918. I said to myself, 3 days and you'll be 7 years old. I was saying it to stop the sensation of falling off the round, turning world into cold, blue-black space. But I felt, you are an I. You are an Elizabeth. You are one of them. Why should you be one too? I scarcely dared to look to see what it was I was. I gave a sidelong glance. I couldn't look any higher at shadowy gray knees, trousers and skirts and boots, and different pairs of hands lying under the lamps. I knew that nothing stranger had ever happened, that nothing stranger could ever happen. Why should I be my aunt or me or anyone? What similarities, boots, hands, the family voice I felt in my throat, or even the National Geographic and those awful hanging breasts held us all together or made us all just one? How, I didn't know any word for it, how unlikely. How had I come to be here like them and overhear a cry of pain that could have got loud and worse but hadn't? The waiting room was bright and too hot. It was sliding beneath a big black wave, another and another. Then I was back in it. The war was on. Outside in Worcester, Massachusetts, were night and slush and cold. And it was still the 5th of February, 1918. So reading this time reminded me that in Japan, where I lived when I was a little kid, kids are considered to go through kind of a profound change when they turn 7. That is to say, until they're 7, they're treated like babies. They're considered to be kind of like babies. And they can do anything they want to do. Nobody ever punishes them. People carry them around on their backs and so on. But then when they turn 7, they're considered to reach an age of something like infantile maturity, if you like. They're considered to be capable of responsibility and answerability and a certain kind of consciousness. And that occurred to me because that's exactly the point at which she almost is. She's turning 7, you know? So, yeah, Leslie?
I remember being told at some point that 7 was considered to be the age at which kids can comprehend death.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's traditionally the age of reason. That's a Western thing as well as a Japanese thing.
Hmm.
So here she is in this, it's so beautifully visualized, this scene, this waiting room that's, as she says, too bright and too hot, but it's dark outside. She's in Massachusetts. It's black, black streets, cold. She's in there and she's kind of waist high with the other people, and she's too shy to look around and see their faces. So this little kid who can already read, she's buried her head in the National Geographic. I don't know about you, but that's where I first saw naked ladies, you know, except for my mom, of course, every once in a great while. But it's like the National Geographic, those pictures of what, exotica, right? And what's interesting to me is that she's more freaked out by the breasts than by the long pig, which is a dead guy on a pole, right? Um, that was what the cannibals called us. We were long pig. Um, and she's fascinated by these rituals, this sort of Africana, this, um, strange rituals of babies with bound heads and women with bound necks and women with naked tops and so on. She's staring at those pictures and she's fascinated and also kind of terrified, you know? And she's not with her grown up. Her Aunt Consuelo is in the doctor's office, the dentist's office. So she's by herself being told to wait. Probably her little feet don't touch the ground, And then she's looking around at other people's shoes and their hands and their coats. And she's reading. And all of a sudden she hears this startling noise in this deadly quiet of a waiting room. And it's like something flips. It's like it flips a switch into a kind of what Henry James's brother William James called vastation. He had an experience like this in a dining room after dinner one time when he says everything kind of fell away. Everything just dropped away from him. And he was in a state of vastation, he calls it. And then after a few minutes, he came back to his own consciousness. And it's a similar thing, I think, that's happening here when she says it's like she's falling off the edge of the world, falling back into space, falling, tumbling, tumbling, tumbling back into space, And it's strange. It's not logical. It's just this thing that happens. And then she starts wondering, and then she has to repeat, probably for the first time, really kind of her conscious identity. You are an I. The really famous lines in American poetry. You are an Elizabeth. You know, you are a me. That's me. I'm here. I'm not these other people. I'm not my Aunt Consuelo, although, like her, I could shriek in the dentist's office. But then she says, boy, like we're all bound together. We're all together in this waiting room, which also reminds me right now of Sartre's play No Exit, which is where everybody's bound in the same waiting room for all of infinity, you know. Um, I myself am hell, nobody's here, says Robert Lowell in a later poem. But it's like this is just this place, this enclosed place with the bright, bright light and the hot air and these other people in silence, waiting, waiting. And then this brilliant zoom outward at the very, very end. Remember, I mentioned with Deborah Diggs with at the fish houses talking about a poet needs to be able to change closeness or distance to the subject of the poem. And here she's panning way out. She says, you know, um, then I was back in it. The war was on. Outside in Western Massachusetts were night and slush and cold. And it was still the 5th of February, 1918. The first mention of the war, capital W, World War I is going on. It's almost her birthday. The night and slush and cold. And the specific date, this is when this happened. This moment, this day in time is when I said to myself, you are an I, you are an Elizabeth with everything that carries forward for the rest of her life, you know?
I think maybe what's more disturbing to her than you are an I is you are one of them.
Yeah.
That is, it isn't mainly a feeling of solidarity. It's a feeling of these people are strange to her, but then she becomes strange to
Yeah.
herself because she's one of them.
Yeah. 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 Oh, okay. Let's zoom forward a little bit. Oh God, I love this poem, The Moose. We're going to quickly look at the moose. I can't stand to not look at the moose.
Just read it.
I'm getting it. I'm finding the page so that I can read it because it's hard for me to see
Yeah, me too.
the specific letters. Okay, so this is a poem that it took her many, many, many years to finish. It's just gorgeous. The moose, and we can talk about it more next time if we don't finish when everybody has to go today. The moose, from narrow provinces of fish and bread and tea, home of the long tides where the bay leaves the sea twice a day and takes the herrings long rides, where if the river enters or retreats in a wall of brown foam depends on if it meets the bay coming in, the bay not at home, where silted red sometimes the sun sets facing a red sea, and others veins the flats lavender, rich mud in burning rivulets. On red, gravelly roads, down rows of sugar maples, past clapboard farmhouses and neat clapboard churches, bleached, ridged as clamshells, past twin silver birches, through late afternoons of bus journeys west, the windshield flashing pink, pink glancing off metal, brushing the dented flank of blue, beat up enamel, down hollows, uprises, and waits, patient, while a lone traveler gives kisses and embraces to 7 relatives and a collie supervises. Goodbye to the elms, to the farm, to the dog. The bus starts. The light grows richer, the fog shifting, salty, thin, comes closing in. Its cold, round crystals form and slide and settle in the white hen's feathers, in gray glazed cabbages, on the cabbage roses and lupins like apostles. The sweet peas cling to their wet white string on the whitewashed fences. Bumblebees creep inside the foxgloves, and evening commences. One stop at Bass River, then the economies, lower, middle, upper, 5 islands, 5 houses, where a woman shakes a tablecloth out after supper. A pale flickering, gone. The tantrum are marshes and the smell of salt hay. An iron bridge trembles and a loose plank rattles but doesn't give way. On the left, a red light swims through the dark, a ship's port lantern. Two rubber boots show illuminated, solemn. The dog gives one bark. A woman climbs in with two market bags, brisk, freckled, elderly. A grand night, yes, sir, all the way to Boston. She regards us amicably. Moonlight as we enter the New Brunswick woods, hairy, scratchy, splintery. Moonlight and mist caught in them like lamb's wool on bushes in a pasture. The passengers lie back, snores, some long sighs. A dreamy divagation begins in the night, a gentle, auditory, slow hallucination. In the creaks and noises and old conversation, not concerning us, but recognizable somewhere back in the bus, grandparents' voices uninterruptedly talking in eternity, names being mentioned, things cleared up finally, what he said, what she said, who got pensioned, deaths, deaths and sicknesses, the year he remarried, the year something happened. She died in childbirth. That was the son lost when the schooner foundered. He took to drink. Yes, she went to the bad. When Amos began to pray, even in the store, and finally the family had to put him away. Yes, that peculiar affirmative. Yes. A sharp, indrawn breath, half groan, half acceptance that means life's like that. We know it, also death. Talking the way they talked in the old feather bed, peacefully on and on, dim lamplight in the hall, down in the kitchen, the dog tucked in her shawl. Now, it's all right now, even to fall asleep just as on all those nights. Suddenly, the bus driver stops with a jolt, turns off his lights. A moose has come out of the impenetrable wood and stands there, looms rather in the middle of the road. It approaches. It sniffs at the bus's hot hood. Towering, antlerless, high as a church, homely as a house, or safe as houses, a man's voice assures us, perfectly harmless. Some of the passengers exclaim in whispers, childishly, softly, sure are big creatures. It's awful plain. Look, it's a she. Taking her time, she looks the bus over, grand, otherworldly. Why? Why do we all feel this sweet sensation of joy? Curious creatures, says our quiet driver, rolling his R's. Look at that, would you? Then he shifts gears. For a moment longer, by craning backward, the moose can be seen on the moonlit macadam. Then there's a dim smell of moose, an acrid smell of gasoline. So let's go out of screen share at this point. Such a great poem. So remember I mentioned that she lived right on the coastline in Nova Scotia where it kind of curves around like this and it enters New Brunswick going toward the west. And New Brunswick is the most densely wooded part of that part of the world. So it's entering these thick, thick, thick forests. And this bus, which is, probably the only form of transportation except horses that a lot of people have there. This bus is carrying people and it would go all the way down to Boston if you stayed on it long enough. But this is describing, right, getting on the bus and what it looks like there. And it's like you're one road wide between the ocean and the town, and the town might have like 50 people. It's tiny, tiny. I love the names of these places that she names, the economies, lower economy, middle economy, and upper economy. And those are three different tiny little hamlets, and then you've got five islands and five houses. And people live there, just like in Cape Breton, that poem that I love so much, where the man carrying the baby disappears down the cliffside toward the water, you know? So this is this, again, beautiful description of these people who live right on the margin between the human and the other than human worlds. And, perhaps they do a tiny, tiny bit of farming. They have these tiny little farm gardens and they're fishing. And if they have to go someplace, they take the bus, carry their little bags, and people come out to say goodbye to them with, seven people. She's counting seven people and a dog. And the dog is standing there wagging its tail as, whoever it is, grandma, whatever, gets on the bus to go back to wherever she came from. And there's this beautiful description of the weather, the mist, the flowers, the lupin like apostles because they're brilliant blue, you know, the cabbages and the cabbage roses, just so kind of sensually rich and beautiful, simple, simple language. I mean, talk about great poetry can be so simple and so accessible from narrow provinces of fish and bread and tea, home of the long tides, where the bay leaves the sea twice a day and takes the herrings long rides. It's like a child's nursery rhyme almost, you know? And the long tides, the water going out, the water coming in, the fact at this point in time, the water is still full of herring. Um, yeah, and then we've got the sunset and night coming as you enter the woods. And then there's this transformation that starts to happen where people behind her on the bus get sleepy and they settle back and it's dark. And so dark always brings a feeling, if you're safe, a feeling of familiarity. It's like the boundaries between people kind of drop away a little bit, and they start chatting. And they're these probably mostly old geezers and they're talking like, but she starts hallucinating that it's like her grandparents when she was tiny, when she was a little kid, and she would listen to them chatting amicably in the feather bed, and she would listen to them, and then finally it would be safe to go to sleep, right? So just so she hears the people behind her, and she starts feeling as if she's listening to her grandparents in eternity, because of course they'd both been long dead, and she feels them finally settling, like coming to the end of all the stories, like catching up on the news, what happened to so and so, what happened to so and so, and all these bits of anecdote. Oh yes, oh yes, he married, she went to the bad, they had to take Amos away when he started praying, um, and all the little tiny bits sort of gently shuffled back and forth, these people talking to each other, and then it's all gonna just fall asleep. In the bus, you can just imagine its little headlights going through that dark, dark, dark wood, on this narrow little road, right? And then all of a sudden the lights go off, and here's this moose, and this moose is bigger than the bus. And this moose is standing like right next to the windshield of the bus, looming up in front of the bus. And they're curious about the moose. And the moose is curious about them. And the only thing between them, besides the fact that the moose is not human and they are human, is a windshield. And the moose is looking at them, sniffing around, and they're looking at the moose. And they start gently talking about the moose, curious creature. I can't roll R's or I would do it for you, says the bus driver. And they're like, oh, she's, and somebody says safe. Now, if they weren't in the bus, the moose would not be safe. I was told that when I was in Alaska. And it's like, if you get near a moose, get away from the moose, because the moose can like just put one foot on you and you're dead. But they're safe being in the bus. Presumably, the moose is not going to go on a rampage.
Well, it's also a cow moose without babies.
Yeah, true, true.
It's a bull moose might be a whole other thing.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And so it's a moose and it's a she, it's a mama. Again, a mama in a poem by Elizabeth Bishop, just like the mama who loves us all. And then this moose just gently, quietly turns away and enters the quote, impenetrable woods. And indeed, they would be impenetrable to most humans, but not to a moose. And as they look at the moose, she says, why do we all feel the sensation of joy? I mean, what a word in the poem at that point. This this quiet joy that just fills their hearts at being confronted or, at being in the presence of something so other and so huge and so almost like little g godlike and so strange and so calm and so just emerging. It's like a hierophany, like a sudden manifestation of the sacred. Here comes the moose out of the impenetrable darkness. And it's not like, the goddess Athena or something. Beautiful. It's this homely thing, this big, old, awkward, clumsy, huge thing. But it just comes and then it just vanishes. And then the bus continues its way, and the bus smells of moose and the acrid smell of gasoline. So again, we've got this great poem about this meeting between the human and the other than human. This poem is in the Eco Poetry Anthology, and we've got this great poem about the fact that they are kin and yet they're not kin, that they are joined and yet they are other. Just such a great poem. A journey poem. So comments on this poem, Douglas?
Yeah, when I lived in New Hampshire, I lived in Sandwich, although I lived in Center Sandwich. So it was like
As opposed to upper or lower Sandwich.
There was North Sandwich and East Sandwich, and I lived in Center Sandwich.
Yeah.
And we would sometimes have moose in our yard, and there was a wetland not too far from my house where you could often see moose, especially in the spring, eating the new shoots, and they are really big. And it's just it was pretty great. I mean, the Sandwich was on the southern edge of the White Mountain National Forest, so there was some serious woods to the north of us.
Yeah.
So I can definitely identify with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I finally got to see moose when I was at this residency in Alaska. And everybody else saw moose before I did, but I finally did. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a moose. And I was taking pictures, It was really beautiful. So beautiful. So ungainly.
So they're the largest animal in North America, I think, the largest thing left since we killed off, or someone killed off all the mammoths.
Yeah.
And it's really sort of a grand thing. I guess it must be not having been to Africa, but sort of like seeing an elephant to something that's so huge and seems so not alien, but in and of itself, kind of.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it feels odd that they would be interested in us because it seems as if they're big and they could just kind of go off and do their own thing.
But they're curious
Yeah.
about us too.
I have to say that bears seem larger, even if they aren't.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've met bears, but only the California black bears, and they don't seem as big as grizzlies, I guess. Grizzlies
are much bigger.
Yeah. But talking about the curiosity that animals feel, we have trails near here, and there was a few years ago this little deer who acted like a pet dog with people. This deer would come out of the woods and come right up to you, and if you were walking a dog, the deer would put her little nose next to the dog's nose, or you could pat the deer would sidle up to you. It was just amazing. It's like this deer was famous all over town. People would say, "Have you seen the deer? Have you seen the deer?"
She came up to me on a trail once and nuzzled my hand.
Yeah.
But, the conjecture was that people had brought her up as a fawn and then released her.
Could be, yeah. It was just beautiful. Yeah, Leslie.
When I was a kid, we went camping in Yellowstone, and I remember we were walking around the margin of a lake on a trail, and all of a sudden, this huge bull moose came charging up out of the water.
Oh my God.
Ran right by my dad, and we all just went, we were astonished and then sort of scared. He could have been hurt or something, but we didn't have a feeling for how big they were before that.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be totally terrifying. Oh my gosh, but quite wonderful. Other comments?
I enjoyed the description of the Bay of Fundy, though it wasn't named,
Yeah.
but that bay is at the very beginning of the poem.
Yeah.
And I thought the moment when the moose is seen is was cleverly done because everybody was about to fall asleep. And
Yeah.
they're in that dreamy state that precedes being deep
Yeah.
asleep. And suddenly they were startled out of it. So it's not
Yeah.
just the strangeness of the moose, but it's the strangeness of recovering um, your awareness of your surroundings that
Yeah.
adds to the beauty of the moment.
Yeah. And it's also almost like, if you want to be magic about it, like the fact that they are almost falling asleep enables them to enter this state of magic, this state where the moose appears.
I really like the part where it's getting dark and most people have fallen asleep, but this couple is having this very sort of intimate conversation about their family history,
Yeah.
in the way that you actually hear people become sort of anonymous, safely anonymous on airplanes and things like that.
Yeah.
You'll be sitting there hearing a pretty private conversation, with all the details. It's fascinating, all the details about people's lives that way. But that seems so real to me that when it gets dark,
Yeah.
it's a sort of a safe anonymity.
Yeah. 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 It's lovely. I love this poem. It's so beautiful. And it's like a child's story in its simplicity, but it's also very much not like that. Beautifully chosen details. You can see why it would take her a long time to write. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, guys, we'll finish talking about Elizabeth Bishop next time, to my great sadness. But then I'm excited about Robert Little. Good. So have a good couple days and I'll see you. Thanks a lot for being here. Bye.